Welcome. I'm Steve Walker, a life coach and meditation teacher, and this is a live session on emotional self defense. Um, and for those of you watching live, I'd love to have an active chat. I hope you'll participate actively, share your questions, thoughts, reactions, pushback, anything. Um, and you may want to start off and let us know where you're tuning in from. I can see that some people are at it already. And Tanya, it's always good to see you. Yeah, I got back Saturday night. Uh, so we'll able to get one more session in before the end of July. Victoria, good morning to you. Um, so, emotional self defense. Um, we're going to talk about something today that basically um, everyone experiences, right? These emotions that can torment us, take control of us, dominate our thinking. Um, and very few, if any of us, were taught to handle these well. Um, and we're not going to talk about suppressing emotions. That's what a lot of us were taught growing up, or being stoic, ditto. Um, it's also not uh, about being at the mercy of our emotions. That's what a lot of us ended up being after we were raised without a lot of emotional intelligence. Um, it's going to be about managing them in a way that is, I think, more sustainable and more advantageous to us. And um, the self defense part I'll get into, but I studied and taught a variety of martial arts for over 20 years, and it always struck me in my studies and teaching that how much the martial arts was a metaphor for other aspects of life, including, I would argue, our emotional well-being. Um, so most of us, when we were growing up, we were taught, um, one of two things about difficult or challenging or hard emotions. One was push through them, right? Kind of suck it up. Don't let them show. Don't let them get in your way or slow you down. Um, Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That was my dad's approach towards emotions. And you can kind of understand. I mean, given the generation he was from, they were older when I was adopted. Both my parents grew up in the Great Depression. My dad volunteered for the Navy at the age of 16. He lied about his age, though he didn't actually enter the Navy until he was 17. He went down right after Pearl Harbor, the day after Pearl Harbor, with his friends to volunteer. And during combat in the Pacific, saw some of the worst action and suffered from what we now know as PTSD the rest of his life, right? So you can imagine that someone who had not been uh, uh, counseled or had therapy for the PTSD just learned to suppress and try to suck it up. It didn't play out well for him. I think around the time I was adopted, either right before or after, he went catatonic one day and had to be hospitalized for a bit. And was, I think suffered from a lot of depression in his life, and um, was prone to outbursts of anger and violence at times, right? And um, but that's all he knew, right? Was that way of dealing with it. And then the other way that some of us were taught to deal with challenging emotions was to basically be overwhelmed by them. Feel it all 100%, no filter, no strategy for coping or dealing with them, really. That was my mom, a very anxious, worry filled person who I think felt overwhelmed and unable to cope a lot of the time. Um, so The reality is neither of those approaches works, but that's all a lot of us ever had to deal with them. Um, the first approach is really about suppression, and that's going to come back and bite you in the butt at some point. And the second one is, living constantly with your nervous system disrupted, and it's exhausting and chaotic. Um, so there's got to be a third way, right? And for me, the third way it relates to the martial arts. And in two different martial arts, one that I studied, jiu-jitsu, and the other that I experienced and went to, I think, a couple of seminars about, aikido, um, offered me this insight of not meeting force with force and not resisting, but and not running from it or allowing it to overwhelm you, right? I mean, the reality is, if you're getting attacked, if you can run successfully, you can get away, you run. But there are times where you can't do that, and you're really faced with, like, kind of getting overwhelmed by the oncoming force, or meeting the force with force. And there are a lot of martial artists that do that. It's very hard block moving forward towards the person to meet their punch towards you, whatever. And instead, in jiu-jitsu and aikido, you redirect your opponent's force, energy, and use it against them, right? So rather than resisting and trying to block or meet it with your own force, you redirect it. I had this one time where I was at a seminar for black belts with this aikido grandmaster, and he picked me out of the crowd, 100 people, whatever, to attack him, to punch him. And I did, and I was, like 20 something, and he was 60 something, and I was like, I don't want to hurt you. And he laughed. He said, don't worry, that's not going to happen. And so I tried to punch him, and I didn't even feel him touch me, but he kind of leaned out of the way and redirected my energy. I flipped in the air, 360, ended up on my back looking up. And he laughed, and everybody gasped, and he helped me up. He said, "You want to try again?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." And I was like, "This time I'm really gonna hit him." Same thing. Woo! And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And I'd been studying jiu-jitsu, right? My black belt was in karate and jiu-jitsu. So I understood the principles behind this, but it was really amazing to have this done at such a high level to me. And it felt really that it was as much about the energy being redirected as anything. And and since then I've thought, like, oh yeah, that makes sense emotionally too. That we're often finding ourselves feeling like we need to resist or fight, right? The sadness or the anger, right? Or the fear. Um, and that's not the right approach, I think. You can redirect it and use it to your advantage, right? Much like, um, you know, in Aikido and in Jiu-Jitsu, you use the other person's energy or force to your advantage. Um, so, you know, and good morning to Charlotte. Um, so, why is this so hard? Why are these hard emotions so hard? Let's maybe start there. Um, so part of it is that we weren't taught emotional intelligence. We weren't even taught emotional literacy. So a lot of us go around with these intense emotions, and we don't even know what we're feeling. We can't even name what we're feeling, right? People will say, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm fine, I'm stressed, but they can't actually pinpoint, like, what's the actual emotion that I'm feeling? And they don't want to, right? Because they're afraid of it. They're afraid of this feeling that's so deep. They just want to paper it over and ignore it and move on. And but the problem is that without naming the emotion and understanding it, we allow ourselves to still sit in our emotion center, our amygdala in the back of our heads, and and just keep running this narrative, right? This emotional narrative. And the reality is that the emotion, if we can name it, uh, that will do a couple of things to our brain, but also it allows us to start to understand it and see that the emotion isn't our enemy. It's not a threat to us, though that's what it feels like in the moment because we're sitting in our amygdala and it's great at making us feel afraid of stuff and triggering our nervous system. But instead, the emotion is a signal, it's data, it's information, and that could be really helpful to us. So that's the first thing, right? We want to understand that this is challenging because we're sitting in our emotional center, and the amygdala is really good at kind of jumping in there right off the bat, taking over, triggering our nervous system, and not letting our prefrontal cortex, right, which is where our like rational thinking and weighing pros and cons and thinking about our future selves, all this good stuff, like that doesn't even get a chance to get off the mark, right, and get involved because the amygdala is like, we're in charge. So we don't have a chance to think. That's why often we get a stimulus and then we have this emotional reaction and boom, we respond right away through the emotion, often saying or doing something that we regret, we wish we hadn't, we feel bad about, guilty about, ashamed about, whatever. And so what we want to do is change that whole dynamic of what's happening in our brains so that we have the stimulus, right, the thing that happens, and our emotional reaction, but then we can do things that will build a pause before we actually respond to the stimulus. And by the time we're going to respond to the stimulus, we want to be up here in our prefrontal cortex making good decisions about what to do or say next, right? So that's our goal here, is to change what tends to happen habitually in our brains when we're triggered and have a strong emotional response, right? So the first thing we want to do in emotional self-defense is we want to know our opponent, right? And understand what the opponent is actually doing to us and why, right? So that we know how to respond. And, you've got to, in the martial arts, you certainly have to know that. You have to recognize that, like, oh, this person's doing X to me, right? They're punching me, they're trying to choke me, whatever they're doing. And so, with emotions, the first thing you want to do is name and identify the actual emotion that you're experiencing, right? And that's for two reasons. One is you want to be able to understand it so you can figure out how to take advantage of it and work with it, right? Learn from it. Most people never do this, right? Again, a lot of people don't know how, right? They just haven't developed that capacity to be able to understand and name their emotions and separate out different emotions from each other. Right? So they skip this. They don't do it. But we've got to understand what we're actually dealing with, right? So for instance, let me give you for instance, and I'll talk about this more later, but anger. A lot of times people feel agitated, and they say, "I'm angry." And that's not what they're actually feeling. They might be feeling frustrated or resentful, right? And those are different emotions, right? And different causes, right? And different paths forward. Also, anger can be fear. Anger is often fear. Anger is often fear with helplessness or hopelessness on top of it, right? So you're feeling afraid of something, but you don't know what to do about it. You don't think there's anything you can do about it. You kind of feel hopeless and helpless. That leads to anger. A lot of times that's what anger is. So being able to label these things is really important, right? Is this anger or is it really fear and hopelessness or helplessness, right? If it's the latter, then, well, there are things we can do about that, right? if it's not really anger, but it's frustration, it's impatience, it's resentment, right, over perceived, injustices or people violating your boundaries over and over again, well, then there's a different path forward there, right? Um, so labeling really important. Instead of just saying to yourself, "I feel bad," you're like, "Well, how do I feel? Do I feel humiliated? Do I feel afraid? Do I feel resentful? Do I feel ashamed or guilty?" Like those are all bad, right, in our heads, but we don't want to see them actually as bad. We want to just see them as, oh, this is this emotion. It's okay that I'm feeling it, right? That's just a natural thing. All these emotions are natural things, but let me understand what exactly I'm feeling and then figure out what I want to do with that, right? The other thing that's really cool about naming the emotion right away, this blew my mind when I first read about this, is that naming the emotion, right? Identifying the specific emotion shifts you from your amygdala, right? Fear and emotion center, to your prefrontal cortex, the logic, rational thinking, decision making, right? All that stuff. It shifts your thinking up here, right? Because your amygdala can't figure out like what you're feeling. It's just like, we're feeling something bad. And you should be afraid. And oh my God, alert the nervous system. But if you go, what am I feeling? The brain goes, whoop. And right away, your amygdala starts to calm down and your nervous system starts to calm down. And your prefrontal cortex is taking over. Isn't that amazing? Just that, just by identifying and naming the emotion that you're feeling, right? And they've studied this in neuroscience. There was a study out of UCLA at some point about this, and uh, amazing, like absolutely amazing. And it reduces. They've seen that it reduces the intensity of the emotion you're feeling just by, and they can measure it just by naming the emotion, right? Pretty awesome. So, job number one, when you're feeling a strong emotional reaction, some difficult emotion coming on, name it. What am I feeling? What am I actually feeling right now? Right? Maybe even put your hand on whatever part of your body you feel it in. I tend to feel it a lot here. Some people feel it more up here. Some people feel it in their jaws, right? Where do you feel it? And we'll get back and talk about those kind of body signals later on. But you're right, Charlie. It's amazing. I love that. Okay, so that's kind of principle number one, step number one. Number two is don't resist the emotion with kind of a strong emotional response or resistance on your part, right? Don't fight it. Don't suppress it. Don't resist, right? What you resist persists, right? If you try to resist the emotion, it's going to tend to go on and even magnify, right? And that's not what we want, right? A lot of people, though, look at this mindset of acceptance, right? That in some ways what we're doing is instead of resisting, we're accepting. There was a stimulus, I had an emotional response. Yep, that's okay. But that's what it is. It is what it is. Some people say, well, I don't want to validate that. Well, why not? Well, because acceptance and validation for some people feels uh, um, like saying it's okay, that it's approval, that I want to feel this way. That's not what it is, right? It's acceptance of the reality that we're emotional beings and we have emotional reactions, then that's okay, right? It's not good or bad. It just is. What matters is what we do with it, right? And so it's really important to say, like, the anger is here, the fear is here, the grief is here. It's okay, right? The acknowledgement that it exists, in part, buys you a little bit more of that space, right? The naming of the emotion buys you a little bit of space between stimulus and response. acceptance, going, okay, I feel anger. Anger is here right now. It's present. I'm experiencing anger, right? That emotion is here and I'm experiencing it. Or fear, whatever it is. Okay, that's great. And you bought yourself a little bit more of that pause there, right? And no judgment. You haven't been like intensified it by beating up on yourself. Oh, why do I feel so angry? Why do I so afraid? Right? We're going back to our amygdala, and our amygdala is taking over again. No, just go. It's okay, right? Acceptance. This is what I'm feeling. It's just what I'm feeling, right? Um, we're buying more space with that. So instead of saying I shouldn't feel this, just be like, this is what's here right now. This is just, it just is what it is. I'm experiencing it. It's okay, right? Charlotte says, could it be because we are becoming more aware of what is going on and bring it more to a cerebral aspect? Instead of being emotional, we are being cerebral and naming what it is we're experiencing. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's essentially that what if you can say to yourself, I need to name this. Name what this is. Your brain can't do it, doesn't do that in your amygdala. So your brain is going to go to the part of your brain that does that kind of identification and rational thinking of like, oh, let me identify this and understand what this is, right? So it's just literally shifting from one part of the brain to the other, right? And as a result, it then quiets the amygdala, right? Which gives your prefrontal cortex even more opportunity to kind of take over and run the show, right? Um, okay, third, redirecting, right? So again, in jiu-jitsu, you redirect your opponent's energy against them and their strength against them, right? Um, their force, in a way, becomes your advantage. So we want to do that with this emotional reaction. We want to turn it to our advantage. So the energy is real. You can feel that energy, right? And so we want to redirect the energy of the emotion and use the emotion as an ally in a way, as an aid to us, right? As a source of information and data, right? So for instance, anger, when it's redirected, can give us clarity about what really matters to us and what needs to change. And again, if the anger is really underlying it is fear, the fear redirected is useful information about what's at stake, right? And where we need to demonstrate some courage, right? And maybe what we need to feel safer in that situation, right? Grief redirected is often more evidence of love and connection and depth, right? And our capacity for love and depth of connection, right? Um, in some ways, grief then becomes a gift, right? Of showing us that it is this extension of love and deep connection and what's possible for us in life, right? Um, so so here we want to tap into our curiosity, the superpower of curiosity. And once we've identified what the emotion is and accepted that it's just here right now we want to redirect it and say, okay, instead of you tormenting me anymore, what can I learn from you? What information do you provide for me that will help me understand what matters to me, what's important to me, what I need in terms of safety, security moving forward, what I'm capable of moving forward. Right? There's so much that these emotions can teach us in these moments, right? So that's the next stage, right? Is to redirect it, and instead of seeing it as a threat, see it as a source of information and wisdom and understanding, right? Depending on what the emotion is, it has different things that it can teach us, right? Charlotte says, I only ask because I'm very data driven and I can see this pause and naming technique would really help. Yeah, that's great. Great. I'm glad that's helpful. Okay, next, knowing when to disengage, right? Knowing when to disengage. There are times where our nervous system is disrupted because of this emotion. And uh, and it's more challenging for us to get the prefrontal cortex to take over, right? And this can happen if we're really, really triggered, right? So what do you do in that situation, right? You don't want to just sit there and be overwhelmed. That's a lot of the time what we do, right? Or turn your anger into an lashing out at the other person. We don't want that, especially if they're lashing out at us in that moment. Don't want to do that. Nothing good's going to come of that. So what do we do? There are times where you don't need to fight the fight right now, right? Where what you need to do is step back and return when you're more regulated, right? To retreat, right? And gather yourself, gather your defenses, right? In a way. But defenses not in terms of like walling yourself off, whatever, but in terms of calming your nervous system, right? And getting yourself back to a regulated state. So, this is hard, right? But when we're being flooded emotionally, and our nervous system is fully activated, then a rational, kind of thoughtful, intentional response is really impossible. So the good news is that it takes about 20 minutes to get rid of the stress hormones, adrenaline, et cetera, that are triggered when your nervous system is dysregulated. So if you can buy yourself 20 minutes, you can come back and re-engage and be more thoughtful, right? You need a longer pause because your brain's just so flooded with stress hormones. So, you got to practice saying to yourself and the other person, like, I'm flooded right now, and I need to step back I'll re-engage. Right? It's not avoidance; it's a thoughtful strategy given the circumstances. And sometimes, if that other person is triggered and their fight or flight is engaged, they're going to see this as more threatening, right? Initially, right? And so it's going to make them they're seeing you doing the flight, and it makes them want to fight more. And and so what you can say is, look, I care about this and I care about you. But I can't deal with this right now, right? I'm not in a place where I can think rationally. I need 20 minutes to clear my head. I'm going to set a timer. Get out your phone. 20 minutes. I'll be back right here. And then you got to honor that. Be back there in 20 minutes, set the timer, go for a walk, do some breathing, get some sunlight on your face, whatever you can do. And then when you feel regulated, you come back, 20 minutes, you're back, and you should be able to re-engage more calmly then, right? More rationally at that point. Sometimes we need to do that, right? And again, the other person's not going to be happy with that. But hopefully, if you're reassuring to them, look, I care about you, I care about this situation, we're going to come back, I'm going to engage with you, but I can't do it while I'm being flooded with all these stress hormones. Setting a timer, 20 minutes, I'll be back. And you got to honor that, right? Um, so, which of the emotions are often really challenging to us, right? Um, Anger, right? I've mentioned several times already. Um, it's often the fastest to come on. It can come on like in the blink of an eye, and it usually carries a social cost to us, right? It's usually pretty costly socially, right? With the person we're directing it towards or the people around us, right? So we need to learn how to manage that better. It, as I said earlier, it's often a sign of fear with helplessness or hopelessness layered on top, right? It's important to recognize if that's what's going on. Or in other times, it feels like there's been some kind of violation, a value, a boundary, an expectation that you had, right? And that makes us feel hurt and angry. Um, so, we need to say, okay, I'm feeling angry. And maybe then, okay, what's underlying this? Is it fear? Is it feeling like something was violated, some trust was violated or something. Um, what specifically is this about, right? To really be curious about it, right? Really sit there and be curious to what comes up. We just sit there quietly and do a couple of deep breaths and just throw out the question, what is this about? Oftentimes our subconscious will offer it up, right? Why, because why am I reacting so strongly? Often we're like, why, this doesn't make sense. Often it's not about the thing right in front of us, right? It's about something we've been repressing, right? For me, I had a time when I was younger, in my 20s, where I experienced road rage a few times. And that's just not me typically, right? I get frustrated with other drivers, but I can usually laugh it off. Uh, it's almost always, when I've experienced it in the past, it's almost always repressed guilt, shame, anger, resentment, right? Something else is just coming out in the moment against that person who cut me off. So otherwise, why do I really care, right? Um, so we got to be curious. What's this really about? Something I haven't said, something I haven't done, something I did say, something I did do, right? Um, and and the data that's available can be really useful, and then the anger is a source of this data and information about what really matters to us and what's really going on that we need to deal with, instead of angry energy that we're going to use in bad behavior to try and hurt someone emotionally or whatever. Fear and anxiety, which are related, right? They're not the same, but they're related. Those are probably the most chronic ones that we wrestle with, and they are exhausting, right? They're really exhausting. Um, they're often, particularly in this day and age, they're running as background noise almost all the time, right? And with 24/7 cable news, social media, you name it. I mean, polarization of society. Fear and anxiety are there like all the time with a lot of us. Um, and and the brain, the amygdala, sees whatever's causing this anxiety and or fear as a threat, and an emotional threat is no different to our brain and to our amygdala and our nervous system than a physical threat. So, you watch a little bit of Fox News, or what is it, MS Now or whatever, or the local news, and you get triggered by it, your anxiety, your fears up, and your brain goes, oh, it feels the same as if someone's pointing a gun at you. And so, but they're not, right? They're not the same. So one thing you can do to kind of shift things into your prefrontal cortex is say to yourself, oh, I'm feeling fearful, or I'm feeling anxious. Is there a real and present danger now? Is there a real threat now? The answer almost always is no, right? And so then, okay, is this something I'm imagining? Is it some potential future threat? How real is that? How likely is that? Right? And usually, most things we go, not really. Especially the stuff that's going around us in society and on TV or whatever. Like, none of that is an immediate threat to you, right? And most of it's not going to directly affect you anytime soon either. So take a deep breath, right? And be like, okay, I don't have to do anything about that right now, right? Um, a lot of the time, anxiety is really about a future threat that may never come about, probably won't come about, right? Um, so in that case, you want to think about, like, okay, what's under my control and what isn't, right? And if there's a real concern, there's something I can actually do about it. Okay, what's one small thing I can do right now that moves me forward in addressing this real or potential danger or threat, right? Do something, right? If it's real, something you can do about it, do it. Do one little thing. Because then what you find out is that, oh, rather than fear paralyzing me, I can actually take a little baby step. Everything's okay or better. I can take another baby step. And that's how we build courage, right? Is not by waiting for the fear to go away or fighting or repressing the fear or anything. It's about understanding the fear and learning from it. Oh, this is what I'm afraid of. Oh, one small thing I can do about that? I could do this. Oh, that turned out okay. I can do the next thing. Boom. Now the fear is going down, and you're carrying it with you and learning from it as you go, rather than it being an impediment or a block to you doing what you want to do. That's how we build courage, right? Um, Shame and guilt. Ooh, these are some of my favorites to talk about. Shame and guilt torment a lot of us, right? They are probably the most corrosive, right? They really wear at us, beat us up, right? And don't get talked about very much at all. Um, Shame is I'm bad, right? There's something wrong with me. And guilt is I did something wrong, right? They're not the same, they're different, right? Shame is about you, some kind of like inherent flaw in you. And guilt is about something you said or did. But they're both corrosive for you. Um, and and they tend not to be very helpful a lot of the time. So what we want to do is figure out which it is and what we can do about them to kind of lower their power. Uh, so shame thrives in the shadows, right? It thrives in secrecy and silence. So the antidote is it being witnessed. And so with shame, you want to think about like, who could I share this with? Right? Who can I share this thing that's causing me shame with? Right? Ideally, someone safe, someone you trust, right? Someone who's got your back, and tell them that. And a lot of times that alleviates a lot of the shame, right? Guilt uh, is really about like, is there something I can do to repair this? And this is really important in relationships, right? Where repair is an important part of building trust and making deposits in the emotional bank account. So if you're feeling guilty, your question should be like, I'm not just going to keep sit here beating myself up emotionally. What's something I can do to repair this, right? Because of what I did or said. And now you can move towards healing and repairing, and it lowers the impact of the guilt, right? Um, and then resentment, which can, again, as I said earlier, sometimes we feel like it's anger, and they're related. Resentment is almost like a accumulated anger. You get angry with people over these slights, boundary violations, whatever, and they were never addressed adequately. And so you just keep having more and more and more and more, and it builds up. And that's what resentment is. It's like, oh, look at all these things you've done to disappoint me or frustrate me or violated my trust or whatever. Um, so it's a signal that something's been tolerated too long. But that's good information, right? It means there's a conversation you need to have. There are boundaries you need to put in place, right? Um, and so that's really helpful. Like resentment, can be really helpful if you understand, if you take that pause and go, what's going on here? Why am I feeling resentment? Right? Different from anger. It's like accumulated anger. And then you go, oh, okay, right, well, I need to have a conversation with that person, or I need to put some boundaries in place. Right. Um, and one of the cool things with all these is that our body often serves as like an early warning system. And this is one thing, it's one reason why meditation and body scan meditations and yoga can be really, really helpful, right? For some people, Tai Chi, Qigong, because it gets you more in touch with your body, connecting mind and body together so that you're more likely to be aware of these emotions when they happen, because you're going to feel it in your body first often, right? Your body is like an early warning system. So, if you feel it in your chest, tightness in your chest, which is what I get. Sometimes I get it in my jaw, right? Some people get it in their temples, right? And they get headaches. Some people feel like a hollowness almost in their stomach or an upset stomach. Some people get flushed, right, in their face. Um, those are often the first signs of some intense emotion coming on. And if you can notice the emotion when it's first manifesting itself in your body, you can get a jump start, right? And so you may want to get in the habit of just doing little meditations, body scans, little check-ins, little moments of stretch, whatever. It's good to move your body, but also it's a good thing to just check in with your body and say, like, how am I feeling? And where am I feeling a little stress or feeling a little anxious or whatever? Like, start to be more aware of how your body feels, and you'll be more likely to notice when it's not quite in equilibrium, right? So that's incredibly helpful, incredibly helpful. And this stuff all matters, right? Because, like, my big theme that people know is integrity, right? That integrity is kind of the foundation of living a good life for me, and leads to better relationships, more joy, etc., more love and peace in your life. And managing these emotions is really important because unmanaged emotions often lead to you doing or saying things that are not in alignment with your core values and beliefs and who you are as a person, really deep down inside. So we want to preserve our integrity that way. You might say something you don't mean. You might make a decision from fear that you later regret. And we shouldn't be making decisions out of fear. You might withhold connection or love or whatever because of resentments or anger or fear, and deny yourself real deep authentic connection, love with other people, right? So in a way, emotional self-defense is integrity in action, right? It's allowing yourself to shift to the part of your brain that can make good decisions based on your integrity, and you're making decisions out of your values rather than out of your emotions, right? So that in and of itself has more integrity, right? Um, so let's take a pause here. I've been talking at you a lot, and maybe close your eyes for another moment and see what's going to be curious. Like, what emotions really trigger you? Which ones do you really struggle with the most? And where do you feel that emotion in your body, right? What does it feel like to you when you're feeling that in your body? So just take a moment and see what comes up for you, right? And and name the emotion like that maybe has been most present for you lately, and try and be very precise about that, right? Um, while people are doing that, just a reminder that these live sessions are free. They're supported with donations from people like you. So if you feel inspired to make a donation to support more of this live content, it is much appreciated. So thanks in advance. I know some of you have made donations in the past, and I appreciate that a lot. And I love having this community here, and it's really nice for people to support that as well. And I hope you're following me. If not, please do. And I have a group here on Insight Timer on living with integrity and joy. I hope you join that if you haven't already. And also, if you want to reach out, if you have any questions about any of this today, or you'd like to have a longer conversation and explore, how we could, work together, or how I could help you maybe with something you're struggling with here, you can reach out to me through my profile, right? So I hope you'll follow and reach out. Love to have a conversation with you. And I've got a little mini course that people seem to like a lot. And you can also message me through that course. We can have a conversation there. And it's on living with integrity. You'll notice the recurring theme. And So I hope you try that if you haven't already. And then I hope you'll check out my meditations. I have a lot of meditations um, here on Insight Timer, and I hope you'll try them out and leave a rating and review. Um, this is a good one. I've done some live sessions on this stuff as well on mindsets, paradigms, and limiting beliefs. So you may want to check that one out. But I got a lot up there. And then I do these live sessions normally once a week. I was just away for 9 days, but I'm back. And the next one is next Wednesday. They tend to be on Wednesdays at noon Eastern. And next week's is, what would you do if you stopped waiting for permission? This is a good one, right? A lot of us are waiting for permission to do a lot of things that we want or need to do in life, day to day, big picture, long term, short term, you name it. So let's explore like what's getting in the way there, and what would you do if you didn't have to wait for permission, right? Could be a really empowering experience. So I hope you check that out. Again, if anybody has any questions or reactions or epiphanies or things that really resonated with you or things you want to push back on, pop it in the chat before we go. We can address them. But I hope this was helpful. I think this stuff is so important. Emotional literacy and emotional intelligence can be taught, can be learned. It's just many of us didn't learn it, weren't taught it when we were growing up. And I learned a lot of it when I was teaching in an innovative lab school where this was part of the curriculum, and I had to learn it to be able to teach it to kids and work with kids on it. So I learned a lot that way. I felt very emotionally unintelligent when I was in early adulthood, my 20s and early 30s, and paid a real price for it over and over again, right? Relationships and marriage and elsewhere. So I believe deeply in this stuff, and it's so important. And I think every school should be teaching it. Every family should, be learning with each other and exploring this stuff. I think it's so vital and essential as a human being. It's like we're these emotional beings, and we weren't given, the owner's manual for how to operate this emotional brain and gut, right? Our gut is an emotional center too. Tanya says, my challenge is pausing long enough to identify the emotions when I'm feeling it. Yeah, and that's the thing to practice on, Tanya, right? And so first off is maybe training yourself. I think of this, and I work with clients on this, to say like, okay, let's just take the next couple of days, and you're just going to focus on recognizing when you are triggered emotionally. Just recognizing it. That's it. Now your radar's on, right? Okay, so the next couple of days, you go, I'm going to recognize it and I'm going to name it. Well, we know that's awesomely powerful because it takes you into your prefrontal cortex and starts to calm your amygdala and your nervous system. Great. So for a couple of days, you practice that. Anytime I feel triggered emotionally, I'm going to recognize it. I'm going to name it. You're already starting to build in the pause, right? At that point, you can go, oh, do I need to calm my nervous system more? Do some deep breathing, right? Take a walk, get some sunlight, listen to some calming music, go in a different room. Those are all things that can help calm our nervous system a little more, make us feel safer. Building the pause longer, right? So we can practice these things, right? And then you can go, okay, now I'm going to make a conscious decision. What am I going to do? What are my options? You can, again, keep it up here. What are my options? What are the pros and cons? All that keeps things in your prefrontal cortex. And your amygdala is just snoozing, right? That's what we want. But you can build that one piece at a time, right? One piece at a time. Does that help, Tanya? Charlotte, thank you for the donation. Really appreciate that. So number one, recognize being triggered. Number two, name it, right? Number three, calm the nervous system. Great. Boom, 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 right? And now you've got a little bit of a pause between your stimulus and your response. That's what you want, right? Not so hard, is it? It's not rocket science, but it's hard. But we can get better at it, little by little baby steps, practice, and it gets better, right? And it's good stuff. And again, like meditation helps, right? Because it enhances your mindfulness. I would argue again, yoga, sometimes Tai Chi, Qigong, like these things can help with our mind body connection and more awareness about our body and where we feel things in our body and when things feel out of alignment in our body, which can be a sign that an emotion is out of alignment, right? And that we need to address that emotion, right? So those are other things we can do to enhance our ability to recognize, name, right? Have that pause, calm the nervous system. They're enhanced by these other practices, right? Chad says, struggled with even identifying triggers until I started practicing mindfulness more often. Right, exactly what I was just saying, right? Can really help because, again, like a lot of times what happens is that we go through day to day and we're living a lot with our amygdala in charge, a lot with our nervous system disrupted. And so we're in fight or flight a lot these days. So we're not thinking rationally. We're not giving a chance for our subconscious to talk to our conscious mind. And that's where mindfulness training can be really helpful. Is the more we practice mindfulness, the more opportunities we have for our subconscious to speak to us. That's why, like again, like when we're meditating, as I said at the beginning, and some of us beat ourselves up when we get thoughts intruding when we're meditating. We think it's supposed to be a completely silent mind. No, 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 no. The Dalai Lama says he gets thoughts like every 3 or 4 seconds a lot of the time. Even the most advanced meditators in one study got thoughts every 10 seconds or so. We're giving some space in part for our subconscious to have some processing power and maybe illuminate us, right? So, and that thought might come up. Our subconscious might go, boom, here, I just thought of this. Or, oh, now I've got some time. Let me share this with you. And maybe you go, oh, that I got a solution to a problem I've been thinking about for a couple of days. Or I now understand what that emotional reaction was really about. And you've given your subconscious a chance to do that processing and share that information with you by practicing mindfulness. It's a beautiful gift, right? Beautiful, beautiful gift. Hope that makes sense. But thanks, Chad, for sharing that. That was great. Charlotte says, I'm grateful that my son's district and many districts here in San Diego teach emotional intelligence. That's awesome. Been a lot of groundbreaking stuff in San Diego, right? Some of the first teaching meditation in elementary schools. Richie Davidson did some of that in San Diego. Some districts even do yoga. There's been pushback by people who do not understand what mindfulness is and think it's a form of indoctrination. It's amazing how that myth and misunderstanding is still prevalent in some places. As a middle school science educator, I think it is totally ridiculous that people fight against these resources due to their own ignorance. I've had the pleasure of teaching some of the lessons myself, and I'm so grateful that our youth can be exposed to emotional intelligence because many of us adults have been on our own and are just learning these things now. Absolutely, Charlotte, you're absolutely right. But maybe some empathy, right? Again, think about emotional jiu-jitsu. Instead of, oh, I can't understand these people, and blah, blah, maybe redirect and learn. What's making them afraid? What are they afraid of? Let me try to understand that. And through understanding what's making them afraid or angry about mindfulness and social and emotional intelligence being taught in the schools, maybe you'll find a path towards helping them calm their nervous systems and understand what this is all actually about, right? If we don't find a path in this society where we're so polarized to understand each other and empathize with each other and learn from each other and each other's fears and anger and all that, we're doomed, right? So that may be a way, Charlotte, to do that, right? Is to really try and get at it. Because a lot of times I found that too, that in the district that I was teaching in and ran this innovative school in, that there were absolutely, when we tried to make changes in the bigger school, there were parents who were angry, and I understood then, oh, they're afraid. What are they afraid of? Well, then we started to get at that. And once we got at that, we could understand and say, like, no, 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 we have the same, in some ways, like goals and aspirations for these kids. Let us help you understand how what we're trying to do could actually accomplish what you want and then some, right? And these other things are really good and important, right? If you look at the studies on social and emotional learning, kids who have programs like yours with social and emotional learning do better remembering content. They do better on tests, right, and other assessments, right? So academic success goes up if you add social and emotional learning to the picture, right? And some of those parents are worried that, like, oh, you're indoctrinating and you should be teaching the basics and drill and skill, and we want our kids to get good grades and go to a good college. Well, yeah, that's all going to happen better if they're learning social and emotional intelligence. Cool, man. And Richie Davidson and Daniel Goleman, the emotional intelligence guy, Goleman, they wrote a book. I think I might have it here. I do. Altered Traits. Altered Traits. Science reveals how meditation changes your mind, brain, and body. This would be a great book club book for the PTA in your district, right? Or for you guys, your school to do with parents, right? Altered Traits. And basically, these lifelong friends, they met in grad school, I think, at Harvard. And and they went through it. They're like addressing what you were talking about. They're like, well, here's the research. Here's what it actually says, right? So check that out. Thank you all. Hope this was helpful. Again, don't forget to follow me and reach out to me if you'd like to have a conversation about doing deeper work on any of this or anything else that you feel stuck with. And join my group on living with integrity and joy. And definitely be back here next Wednesday at noon Eastern. Chad says, so true. Thanks, Steve. You're welcome. Chad, Charlotte, I do empathize, but I must admit I get very frustrated with people raised like me, but unwilling to listen. It can be very frustrating. Natural thing, right? There's nothing wrong with the emotion, right? But then where's the emotional jiu-jitsu? I'm referring more to people that were raised conservatively like me, but refuse to open their minds and hearts. I think it is a bit of curiosity and also accepting that things are not just black or white. Yeah, but is helpful. But so many of my own friends and family are unwilling to change. Yeah, and we can't control other people, right? And that's a reality. But I think we can try to understand that underlying that, I think, is a lot of fear. A lot of fear. And we need to figure out how to help people manage the fear and lower the fear. It's a daunting challenge for all of us, for sure. But what's the alternative, right? Then we get disrupted, we get frustrated, we get angry. It's just a vicious cycle, right? We got to stop that somehow, right? I don't know the big easy answer, but I know what maybe one little step we can do is, right? Charlotte, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you all. Thanks for spending time with me. Deep love and gratitude to all of you. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. And let's go out and be loving energy, right? That's why we're here. We're here to be loving energy. So let's manage these emotions and learn from them so that we can go out and be love, right? Tanya, thank you. Always good to see you here. Thank you all. Again, much love and gratitude. Bye bye.